Okay, you want to start recording?
It should be recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're ready to roll. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to part 2 of our Getting Back on the Bus virtual conference series. This session is called Developing Leaders and the Future Ready Workforce. I'm Lisa Guthrie. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Transit Association, and I'd like to introduce Jamie Crawford, our Program Coordinator, and she is our Zoom Master this morning. We've shifted our conference session presentations to this virtual Zoom format because of the coronavirus, and we thank you for your willingness to participate virtually, and we hope to make the most of our Zoom session today. We're recording the webinar, and it will be available on our website following the event. We'll save all the questions until the end of the presentations, and we ask you to send your questions via the chat box, which you can find by mousing over the bottom of your screen. And if you'll enter the questions in the chat box, we will answer them at the end during the Q&A portion. We ask that you remain muted during the presentations. And we also want to offer a reminder to stay until the end of the presentations, because we will have a special link to our virtual trivia quiz to win a $100 gift card courtesy of our platinum sponsor today, AngelTrax. It's because of generous supporters like AngelTrax that we're able to offer our conference sessions and expo. So thank you, AngelTrax. So at this point, we'd like to introduce our session moderator. Lindsey Robertson Lentz is the Director of Workforce Development at APTA, the American Public Transportation Association. In this role, Lindsey develops and executes workforce development programs for association members to advance the strategic goals identified in APTA's strategic plan. Lindsey is responsible for developing and managing a range of services, including the Emerging Leaders Program, which is created to support and retain the next generation of public transportation leaders. Lindsey is also responsible for leading and implementing the annual work plan of the American Public Transportation Foundation. So welcome, Lindsey. I think you have some outstanding panelists for us today. You're muted.
I do. Thank you, Lisa. I'm excited to introduce our distinguished panelists today. So first we have Tamika Gunn. She's a Senior Organizational Development Manager at Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, PSTA, in St. Petersburg, Florida. Tamika leads the management and implementation of the agency's training and professional development programs, internal communications, and strategic organizational initiatives with a focus on improving culture and employee engagement. Tamika is also the facilitator of Leadership PSTA, the agency's year-long leadership development program for high performers. The program drives individual growth, organizational change, and increases overall business performance. Tamika is passionate about teaching, coaching, and developing employees, and helping them expand their knowledge, deepen their skills, and discover insights that help them gain the confidence to elevate their performance and achieve their goals. Melleady joined USSC Group, now known as United Safety Corps, in 2012 as the Executive Vice President for the North America Transit, First Responder, and School Bus markets. He serves on the New York Public Transportation Association Board and the APTA Business Members Board of Governors. Prior to joining USSC, Ray served as a CEO of Capital District Transit Authority in Albany, New York. Ray began his career fueling and cleaning buses for SEPTA in Philadelphia, and with more than 30 years of experience, he understands the industry at its core and is a tireless advocate of the socioeconomic benefits associated with a long-term national public transportation program. So welcome, Tamika and Ray. So this morning's session will focus on preparing our workforce to lead in this dynamic industry, where people are being called upon to have greater technical acumen while still acting as compassionate leaders in their organizations and communities. As Lisa mentioned, I am APTA's Director of Workforce Development, where I manage our Emerging Leaders Program, a year-long national development program to help prepare transit's rising professionals to step into leadership positions. Along with Leadership APTA, our Senior Executive Program, and CTAA's Emerging Leaders Academy, there are some terrific national professional development options available for transit professionals. However, we understand that with limited seats and restricted travel budgets, these national programs might not always be an option. That's why we wanted to convene this panel to discuss regional and in-house professional development models that have been successful in helping employees gain a greater understanding of the industry while developing leadership and interpersonal skills that will prepare them to advance and to manage. We will first have Tamika, an Emerging Leaders Program alumni. She will share her story of how Pinellas has developed and supported their workforce through Leadership PSTA. And then Ray will discuss the Public Transit Leadership Institute, a regional program developed by the New York Public Transportation Association. Tamika and Ray will share their stories, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions from the audience. So let's get our presentation started with Tamika. Welcome, Tamika.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Lisa and VTA, for inviting me here today. It is really an honor and a privilege, not only to talk about my leadership program, Leadership PSTA, but also to come home, if you will. I'm actually from Roanoke, Virginia, a graduate of William Fleming High School, and a graduate of James Madison in Harrisonburg. So I know you have some folks attending from those areas, so it feels good to be home, although we're meeting virtually today. So Leadership PSTA is a year-long program that we have in-house that we developed back in 2017 for our high-performing employees. Would you go to the next slide, please? The birth of the idea came out of a need that we had for succession planning, wanting to make sure we had a talent pipeline in place for those roles that were going to be coming available either due to retirement or just changes in the industry. We wanted to make sure that we were equipping those high performers that were already in-house who were excelling at managing tasks to make sure that they were also excellent and prepared at leading people. So our Human Resources Department got the support from our board, our CEO, and other executives, and Leadership PSTA was born. Next slide, please. So in the beginning, like many of you, we didn't quite know where to start. So we reached out to our friends at APTA, Lindsey, Robertson, Lentz, and Joe Nagoski, who lead their leadership programs, and they were just a wonderful resource for us. And the great thing about our industry, much like what we're doing today, sharing what we are doing in our agencies, is that people are so open and willing to support and share. So APTA led us to several different transit agencies who shared their best practices and what they were doing, much like we're doing today. We also reached out to our local government and different organizations that had leadership programs in our region, as well as SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, just to make sure that we had best practices from that standpoint as well. Next slide, please. So our program goals were that we wanted our high performers to have more organizational knowledge. We realized that many were working in silos, and we wanted them to be more well equipped with what was going on across the agency, especially in the operations section. We felt like if you're going to be a transit leader, we want you to know all aspects of the agency and how it worked, as opposed to just, you know, their respective departments. So one little fun fact is that our program actually includes driving a bus in the parking lot. So really combining practical book knowledge and leadership theory with hands-on experiences. We wanted to develop our employees, certainly enhance their leadership skills, create more cross-functional or collaborative cooperation, in addition to increasing our rates of employee engagement. So one of the areas to increase engagement is really an employee's relationship that they have with their direct supervisor or manager. And so we felt by equipping those leaders with greater skills in leading and managing others, our employee engagement, retention, and recruitment efforts would also increase as well. Next slide. So the curriculum, because we are bringing people together from all over the organization, we start with team building activities. Every month for the year, the students meet for a full day of facilitated classroom content. And we cover such leadership topics as communication, coaching, delegating, strategies for influencing others, resolving workplace conflict, and other leadership type topics. Each participant receives a 360 assessment and professional leadership coaching that we have a consultant that we partner with for that. That's a great tool for them to figure out where their strengths are, as well as any blind spots. And then they work with the coach to develop and strengthen those areas throughout the program. We have internal as well as external guest speakers. So a lot of our executives will come in and mentor and coach and train. And then we've brought in external guest speakers, members of our board, different people, leaders in the community, as well as Joe Nagaski comes down every year to meet with the participants, and that's a great experience. Public speaking is one of the areas that every participant, when they join the cohort, always feels like that's one of their weaker areas. And it's because they see our leaders up speaking all the time. And so we try to give them as many opportunities as possible throughout the program to have visibility, whether it just be speaking in a staff meeting. We also encourage them to come and present at board meetings, our track meetings, which is the Transit Rider Advisory Board. So as many public speaking opportunities, because we feel that the more you do it, the better you get at it, and they have that opportunity to hone and sharpen those skills. They also have to do an individual applied learning project. So what that is identifying an area back in their respective departments. It could be a project that they were already working on, or an initiative that their department wanted to roll out but hadn't started yet, an opportunity for them to lead something. And we call it applied learning because we really want them to showcase their newly acquired leadership skills in how they execute that project. The group community impact project is really an amazing experience for the participants. Most of them feel that that is where they actually grew the most. And it is because they're working with others, but also because it is something that they're passionate about, and they can really see their roles in our transit industry making an impact in the community that we serve. So the objective of the group community impact project is to identify a community problem that public transit can help solve. And so as you see on the right side of the slide, I have some of the agencies that we've partnered with. Excuse me, for the Ronald McDonald House Charities, that cohort actually raised $6,000 to sponsor a room at the local Ronald McDonald House. We also provided free transit passes. So any family staying at the Ronald McDonald House while caring for their sick child can have free access to public transit while they're in our area. Safe Place was an initiative that we launched. All of our buses and every PSTA location is now deemed a safe place. And that is an organization that partners with runaway teens or those who are just in distress or unsafe situations that could be related to even human trafficking. So all of our bus operators are trained and well equipped so that if a teen gets on our bus, they can ride for free, and our bus operators will get them to a safe place. Feeding America Tampa Bay is our current initiative, and that is an effort to help the poverty and hungry population in our community, as well as to help solve the issue of food deserts. If you'll go to the next slide. Here's just a photo of one of the food pantries. We actually hosted this on site. This is in the parking lot at PSTA. As you can see, our CEO, Brad Miller, was there, and many of our organization's leaders chipped in to lend a hand to help execute this food pantry. So we're really proud of that one. We actually hosted 4 on site during this year's, or excuse me, last year's cohort. Next slide, please. So some of the keys to success for our program have been an individual expression of leadership. We celebrate leadership at all levels within the organization. So this program isn't just, for those who are in director or executive positions. Anybody can be a leader at PSTA and lead from right where they are. Another key piece that's been great for us is that the content, although it is high-level leadership theory, we really try to make the discussions PSTA specific. So whatever the students are learning, when they are doing their practice or, coaching one another or talking about different scenarios, we want them to apply what they're learning to different things that are happening within PSTA. That helps us to make the learning real, helps us to make it stick, and really makes it a worthwhile experience. We've created a culture of trust. So when people are in the classroom, they know it is a safe place. It is a time for them to take risks, try out their new leadership skills. And really, there's a quote or a saying we like to use, which is failing forward. So even if you fail, you're moving forward, and we turn those into learning opportunities. Executive and manager involvement is really, I would say, probably should be at the top of this list. Our CEO, Brad Miller, makes it known organization-wide that he loves this program. He really supports each of the participants and really tries to make it known that this is a big deal, that these are our high performers, and make sure that they are celebrated. Brad actually throughout the year comes in and speaks to the participants, but he also hosts a one-on-one with them. So pre-COVID, he would meet and have a coffee date with them at Starbucks or Panera. And now he's doing virtual Zoom meetings with, if it's in the morning, they'll have their coffee drink. If it's in the evening, they'll have another drink. So it's great. I actually meet with the managers of the participants once a month as well. And that is the gift that keeps on giving. So what happens is I share the content that was learned during that monthly session with their manager so that the direct manager can hold the participant accountable, ask the person what they learned, and help them to apply it to their job. And then again, that internal visibility, really just giving the folks an opportunity to lead and practice those skills as much as possible. Next slide, please. So some of the outcomes, again, I mentioned that we started the program in 2017. So we're right now, class of 2020 is our fourth cohort. They certainly emerge as stronger, more confident leaders. We have really been able to build stronger interdepartmental relationships and collaboration. Our community partnerships are amazing. I mentioned just a few that we have worked with. Regional collaboration. Now, promotion is not something that we promise as a result of participating in the program, but I would say 100% of the participants have at least acquired an expansion in their role in some way, and at least 80 to 85% of them have received a promotion. Next slide, please. Well, thank you so much for letting me share, and I know you're going to open it up to questions, Lindsey.
Well, so we'll go on to Ray in a second, but I just have a couple questions. This really is such a robust program, and I love that it allows the participants to grow and develop within the organization, but also the projects that they do create an impact in the organization and the community. So I think that that's just so nice and well-rounding as a leader. Could you talk a little bit about how the curriculum for the program was developed?
Yes, absolutely. So again, we started with our board members and our executive leaders and interviewed them to find out what were the types of skills that they wanted our emerging leaders to have, what were the types of skill sets necessary to be able to move from that individual contributor level to supervisor management and on up. So we researched and just tried to find the best curriculum. And so we reached out to our local community college to find out what they were using. I actually had been through a leadership program at a previous employer, and they were actually using the same curriculum. We right now are using DDI, which is Development Dimensions International. So it is an international organization that specializes in leadership development. But I would say for anyone that is looking to start an in-house program, especially right now where there are so many virtual resources, just figuring out the topics that you want, and I'm sure you can find, those online modules to come up with the learning piece of it.
Great. And then you had talked a little bit about career growth. Has the program also helped with employee retention?
Yes, absolutely. So it really gives our folks an opportunity to see a career path as opposed to just coming in and having one role. And I'll just quote one of our young ladies, a millennial who had come to the organization, didn't actually plan to stay there long, but she was a high performer and she was actually in our first cohort. And because the organization really poured into her and she felt that she got so much out of the program, she felt kind of tied, or just, I want to give back. I want to do more for this agency that has done so much for me. So it definitely does help us with retention. Not only the people in the program, but the stronger the leaders that we have leading our workforce helps with retention of other employees as well.
Right. Right. And finally, how do you select who gets to be in the class? I imagine there's got to be a great demand internally for this.
Yes, well, we right now are limiting the program to just our administrative employees and those who are transportation supervisors that are members of the union.
Okay.
So out of our 600 employees, only about 100 are eligible to apply. And so we cap it off at 6 every year, and it is a competitive process. So you have to be nominated by your department head. There's an application that involves 4 essay questions. You have to get a letter of recommendation. And then those that make it through that first round go through a panel interview with all of our executive team. So yes, it is competitive.
Yeah,
it is.
yeah. Great. Tamika, thank you so much for sharing. Obviously, we'll come back at the end with some audience questions. Again, audience members, feel free to start adding any questions to the chat. And we can circle back to those with Tamika. So Tamika, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I know that for a lot of folks, it might not be entirely possible to imagine being able to develop your own internal program. So we wanted to turn to Melleady, who's going to talk about the Public Transit Leadership Institute, which is a regional program, a regional model where a bunch of organizations within New York State work together to develop a program. So Ray, welcome.
Thank you, Lindsey. It's also a privilege and an honor to be with everybody this morning. I'm reaching out from an airport at St. Thomas, and so if there's any background noise, I apologize in advance. Some COVID-related travel issues, which I'm sure all of us can understand at this point. I'm going to approach this from a unique perspective in that I started in this industry as a bus cleaner, and I experienced firsthand the opportunities and challenges associated with upward mobility in the transit industry. And so I'm going to hit some grow your own strategies. As Lindsey indicated, I'm going to talk about the Public Transit Leadership Institute that was established up in New York by the NYPTA board, of which I am part. And I'm also going to hit some technical grow your own strategies. I'll speak to the Keystone program. I'll speak to the Empire program, which was the New York model of the Keystone program, which was the first of its type in the industry. I'm going to talk about leadership development and emphasis at the mid-level management, not the technical side of it, where you're really developing a gap analysis and trying to close that gap, but more of the mid-level management, moving people from tactical to strategic types of thinking and making sure that they're very adaptive, especially given the circumstances we all face today. And then I'm going to talk about leadership identification models, how we identify, and Tamika hit this in her presentation, really how do we identify and help to develop those emerging leaders. Next slide, please. So the first highlight that I'll go through here is really the grow your own leadership development model. This happens to be, Keystone was the first, and this really became a bridge in labor management relations between the TW in Philadelphia and management. We had very, very difficult circumstances. We did not have a good relationship with the union. And training became that common bridge that we found that not only provided some much needed gap analysis, it helped to develop trust and equity between individuals that were making decisions, both in representing the workforce and in leading the organization. And the nice part about the Keystone program was that we were able to not only develop the curriculum, but we were able to conduct skills gap testing, which isn't always possible if you don't have an environment of trust. And so with that established confidentiality, essentially what was established, a confidentiality basis, people would take a test and we would identify collectively the gap between what we knew was required at the technical level and where people were. And then we would target training programs for the organization in those areas. And we also were able to secure funding from, this was a statewide project. Keystone was Pennsylvania. Some of the folks on the call webinar may be familiar with that. And then Empire was New York. And so it was the curriculum development, the skills gap analysis, the targeted training, and then apprenticeship programs to focus forward. And so all of that became part of the program. We applied for DOE funding through the Department of Labor and Department of Education, and we secured grants to help facilitate the financing of those programs and the travel for the mid to smaller size properties that couldn't always make people available. So that's an example of the technical side of making sure we close the gap for technicians that are seeing technology change in quantum leaps right now. We also developed in the late 90s a transit-specific ASC master certification program. I want everyone to think of that as kind of the bar exam for a technician. And up to that point, most of your testing development was done internally. Transit systems would develop a test. That test would be internally administered, and they would pass, fail employees. It tended to be more subjective. It also tended to be a quickly obsolete document. By the time the test was written and put into place, there was obsolescence involved. And so that's been a great addition for the industry as well. Next slide, please. When we talk about programs like NTI, Lindsey and I co-facilitate a program on the maintenance operations executive leadership development side. We talk about programs like that, or PTLI, which is more of a statewide program in New York. Those programs are really developed to really move a mid-level manager who more than likely came up through a more technical or tactical job scope and move them into strategic thinking. And so a lot of the elements of the curriculum in that program are strategy and human capital, strategy and asset management, strategy and new technology, and most importantly, strategy and self. Self-awareness is key in everything. And I want to highlight that in the next slide. There are other curriculum components, strategy and finance, strategy and advocacy, where we really force the applicants and the students to stretch their mind and think about the way things should be and must be in the future, not about the way things are today, and then really closing the gap between what is and what should be. The NTI Maintenance Executive Leadership Program, I talk about ladder to ladder. So a lot of times we think of a career ladder, and I think what that doesn't always allow for is somebody who is an emerging leader, but maybe on the technical side and has to develop administratively and has to develop executive acumen. How do you get them across the organization, cross-train them on those different topics and prepare them for the future? There was no clear path when I was a clean river technician in Philadelphia. And I always committed that when I had an opportunity and I was in a position of authority, that I would work to change that. Next slide, please. So, the 5 factors of success is something that I look at in terms of identifying future leaders. Aptitude is such a big piece of that, but there are other factors that have to be considered: attitude, natural processes, skills, and motivation. Next slide. So when we look at leadership identification systems, the first and most important thing that I look for is a personality assessment, letting that individual have a better, deeper understanding of who they naturally are. And so, CPQ is an example. DISC is very well known. EQ assessment, predictive index, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, the Complete 360, which Tamika had mentioned. Any of these personality assessments that truly allow the individual to become more self-aware. And the point I mentioned here is assessments aren't a label or a category, but it's a key indicator of knowing yourself. And to me, knowing yourself is required in a position of leadership. You have to know what your blind spots are. You have to know what your gaps are. And so when I talk about strategy and self, I spend an awful lot of time talking about identification of what you don't know, identification of your blind spots. And the personality assessment can do that for you, but you can also have a trusted colleague or family that will often tell you the reality about who you are. I often reference the Johari window. How we see ourselves is the first dimension, how we think others see us is the second dimension, and then how others really see us is the third dimension. And really the only way you get that third dimension is through a personality assessment or through a trusted individual giving you feedback. Are you seeking feedback? You asking for that feedback? And so when you really get down to the basics here, you try to separate the fixed mindset from the growth mindset. So when you think about leadership identification, it's the growth mindset that we look for. It's the person that wants to get to the next level and wants to develop their skill sets. And I know we want to believe everybody wants to do that. The reality is I've worked with many people that are very happy doing what they're doing. They're pleased in that role. They're very good at what they do. They're committed to the organization in that role. And promoting them sometimes hurts us and them. And we have to be careful not to do that. Dr. Dweck wrote an excellent book. If anybody hasn't heard of it, it's called The Growth Mindset. I'd recommend it for folks that are interested in this concept. Next slide, please. And so I'll end with this. This is a 9-box, standard 9-box. And what we look at with the 9-box is performance against potential. And the upper right 3 quadrants would really be the identification of future emerging leaders. And this is a great way to identify people. So for example, in the lower right corner, somebody who is very high in terms of performance, very professional in what they do, but has no desire to move to the next level. That would be somebody that in the application, we would kind of root out in that process. But people who are, in that upper right quadrant that show high levels of performance and high levels of potential, we generally identify them in the organization, and we make sure that they are applying for these programs. And we look at things like diversity in talent, diversity in just representing the agency and the communities that we serve. And we make sure that we have kind of a level playing field with how these are applied for and obtained. The last thing I'd mention, and it just gets back to that personality piece and self-awareness, knowing yourself, is that I mentioned it's not a label. Ray Dalio wrote a tremendous book, and he has been in a position of leadership for many years. But he used to have his employees take Myers-Briggs, and they would wear labels on their work uniforms, basically identifying what they were in that test result. I truly believe that a personality test isn't a label. It's an indication of self-awareness. You're not locked into that, but knowing who you are allows you to develop from that standpoint. And that really concludes what I'd like to share with the group today. I'd turn it back to Lindsey for any Q&A.
Great, Ray, thank you so much. Thank you for the overview of the programs and then kind of your personal leadership approach. But also I think it's really nice to have a reminder, and that's something I should have mentioned in the beginning, the reminder about the National Transit Institute, which is such a valuable resource for our industry, and the programs that they offer are covered by FTA funding. So that's always something that I think that is useful. Also now they are doing a lot of webinars. So if you are not on the NTI mailing list, I highly recommend getting on it because they are offering a lot of resources right now. So Ray, you talked a little bit about the Public Transit Leadership Institute, the New York Regional Program. Can you talk about who was involved in the creation of that program?
Yes, the program was established out of need identified by some of the small and mid-sized properties in upstate New York that couldn't afford to send some of their staff to mid-level management programs. And so it was a budgetary need, but it was also a need, a clear need in the gap that was recognized between the knowledge that was required to promote and the knowledge that existed in some of these positions, mostly, again, tactical people that were working either in operations or in positions that were following set procedures, moving them out of that, moving them into a different role. And so we met with the CEOs of the New York State properties that included as large as the MTA and as small as Greater Glens Falls, which is one of the smaller properties in upstate New York, and really identified the areas that were most in need of attention and where the largest gaps were in that professional development. We developed curriculum, and we're now several years into the program, and we have a graduation every year, and we have an application process. So all of the members of the program go through sessions. Lindsey, you were part of the first session in Westchester this past year, and then we moved to Buffalo, Syracuse, Albany, Rochester, and down into Long Island. We've obviously had to move that to virtual training at this point, but it culminates at the end of the year with teams of the class presenting back to the state association. So one team will present on strategy and asset management. So it's a group of 3 presenting the 15-minute overview of how they've developed the strategy and asset management. And strategy and human capital is another subject that's reported on. Depending on the class size, there might be 3 or 4 presentations at the end of the year. That's kind of an overview of the program and the application process.
And you know, one of the great values that I've seen with that program in particular is that between the different sessions, folks from different properties actually go and visit each other's properties to tour their sites and learn more about it. And I really think that the value of the networking within the regions is just, you can't measure it. But also, can you talk a little bit more about the cost sharing benefits for those agencies that participate?
Yeah, because most of this program, the overwhelming majority is volunteer based. We bring subject matter experts in depending on the topic, and the property hosts the event. So the event is held at either, well, now virtually, but prior to COVID-19, it would be hosted by a property to save money. And so the costs are really shared by the smaller properties, each supporting their segment of the program. And you mentioned the networking piece. Whether it's NTI or PTLI, networking is such a huge piece of their development. Sharing ideas, working together on projects, and sharing challenges that sometimes other properties have had to address and have already worked through.
Great. And then there was one more thing that Tamika mentioned in her presentation about the value of the executive support. Can you talk about how important it is to have the executive support for a program such as the PTLI program?
Yeah, the tone from the top is essential. And, Brad, Tamika mentioned Brad's role, but really it starts at the CEO level by embracing that professional development. Training isn't seen as a cost, it's seen as an investment for your future employees and the future of the organization. And all of the CEOs serve on the board at NYPTA and are heavily involved in this program and very supportive of the project. Our next session is next week in Albany, New York. It's hosted by Albany, New York. And so many of the presenters will be, probably in the boardroom at CDTA. But each one of those leaders comes in and presents to the class on the topic that we're addressing. So next week it's strategy and finance and advocacy, and Carmen Brazil will be involved in that. Each of those CEOs in each of those sessions that each of the properties hosts is a lead speaker at that time. And so you have to have it. It's great to see. And I know Brad down at PSTA is pushing the envelope with the project there as well.
Great. All right, so thank you both for your presentations. I'd love to open it up to audience questions. So again, if you have a question for either Tamika or Ray, please feel free to put it into the chat and we will add that to our presentation. And so just getting us started on this, I think that it's important to talk about kind of your own experiences about getting access to advancement opportunities in the transit industry. And I think that that's kind of something that we all have faced both personally and then for our employees. So if you could talk about your own experiences and kind of challenges that you've had with advancing in the industry. And Tamika, why don't you start?
Okay, sure. One of the things that I meant to mention in my presentation was actually that we have added a component to our program, and that is to send the class every year to the APTA conference. And after our first year of doing Leadership PSTA, Lindsey, you and Joe invited Trish and I to share about the program to the Workforce Development Committee. And that was both of our first time attending that conference. And it was eye-opening to just the industry at large. And it was so inspirational. And so we felt like as leaders were emerging in our organization, not only did we want them to have that organizational knowledge, but also industry knowledge, because it's so much bigger than maybe what you experience in your smaller transit agency. You might just think, oh, I work for the local bus company, and not realize the impact that our industry has, not just on the community that you serve, but nationwide.
Yep.
And so attending that conference, having the opportunity to join committees and has just been a great networking tool. And when you go back to your respective properties with that broader vision and knowledge of the industry, it certainly changes the way you do your work at the local level. And it creates more space for opportunities for growth because you have learned, been exposed, and had that opportunity to network. One of the big things kind of culturally at PSTA in terms of career advancement has been kind of like do the job before you get the job. So I've been there 7 years and had 3 positions, and it's because I went to a conference, was inspired, came back with a bright idea. The leadership let me try to implement it, and and then it just grew and grew. So that's just kind of been my experience.
Great. Thank you, Tamika. And Ray?
Yeah, Tamika, I think, hit it right there. It kind of stole my thunder on a lot of times it's a catch-22. And I'll never forget as a young COO being interviewed to be a CEO, and one of the board members in the interview process said to me, you're well positioned for this job. Our concern is you don't have any government affairs experience, and you don't have any PR or marketing experience, and your experience is predominantly in operations. And so I was quick to remind the board member that operations is such a huge piece of what we do. But the way I responded to that is, this is one of those situations where many times you can't get the job without the experience, and you can't get the experience without the job. And my comment was, if you give me this opportunity, I will, double my efforts in these areas, identify areas of weakness, and make sure I surround myself with people who are talented in those areas, because you have to develop yourself sometimes with experience, and you need to be in the role to get that experience. And so I think these programs that we're talking about today, in many ways, try to close that gap without you being in the position, but giving you exposure to those realities.
Very true. And I think that both, much like the Virginia Transit Association, both of you are from states that have robust state associations with robust state meetings. So even, if you aren't able to get to the APTA committees or the APTA conferences, just being able to connect with other folks in the industry is just so valuable, because the best thing I think about transit is that everybody is willing to share and poach and steal, and everybody's willing to give it away. So I think that is one of the most valuable things, especially as Tamika mentioned, building a program, just what's valuable, how do you do it, what's the structure look like? So that's really, really a value. So the work that VTA does is wonderful. As you two are building programs, what you think the essential traits and characteristics that you strive to incorporate into the learning?
So one of the key things there, we have what's called key principles that are actually woven throughout our entire program. And basically it's leading with empathy. I would say that is the biggest key. In everything that we do and everything that we talk about. It's kind of the baseline for everything. So when you're communicating, when you're coaching, when you're resolving conflict, when you're, trying to drive change, being able to understand how that affects your employees as well as the organization, and having the empathy in your leadership style is a real key to success.
Thank you. And Ray?
Yeah, I would say 2 things, and I, just to re-hit these. The first and most important piece is the self-awareness piece, and I push that in any program that I put out in terms of whatever type of self-assessment is being used, just being aware of what you are not, what you know and what you don't know, so that you can further develop areas that make sense at that point. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it makes sense to surround yourself with somebody that has that talent and acknowledge that it isn't yours. You're not naturally good at that. I can laugh about this, Lindsey. I'm not detail oriented. So we've had this conversation so many times. So, I first of all, I want my employees to know that I am not. I'm more that big picture vision type mind. But I think you have to be aware of what you are, what you aren't, and try to develop it. So I have to try to be detail oriented when it matters, and I have to know that I'm not natural that way. The second piece is really, again, getting that longer term view. I talk about the vision funnel, and thinking about the future, what is probable and what is preferable, and trying to arc the future to that preferable state. So vision and self-awareness are the two pieces I really hit hard in the development program.
Mika, you have a follow-up?
I wanted to add to my answer too a second piece, and that is building relationships. One of the keys to our program is the diversity of the participants. So we try to make sure that we limit it to where we have one person from each department represented in the room. And that diversity of thought and those relationships that are built by them going through this program together have really strengthened our organization. Because let's say you work in marketing, you have no idea what's going on over in transportation, or maybe you don't know what's happening up in finance. So one of the initial modules that we do is called Valuing Differences. And it talks about different work styles, and it really helps our participants. There's a lot of, oh, wow, I didn't know you did that. Or I didn't know all of that went into, making bus routes or making bus schedules or whatever. And just building those relationships and that collaboration and that diversity of thought has really been a game changer for us.
And I think you both bring up great points. Just both empathy. Empathy is my most favorite word that anybody could say. And I think it is so valuable, especially in the industry that we're doing, where we're working in the community and helping develop communities, but also the importance of a program taking time to help people understand who they are. And it is such a gift. Most times in your day-to-day work, no one's giving you time to think about who you are as a leader, how you're managing, how you're reacting and responding to people. So again, as we're looking at the different assessments that are great, I love the emotional intelligence assessment and the DISC assessment, because it helps you think about how you lead and how you work and comport yourself, but also how you interact with others. So I think that those have been two very valuable ones. Great. And I think that you both bring up something that's kind of top of mind for both of us, or kind of the world as we are right now. How are you ensuring the diversity in these programs? How you are ensuring that everyone has access and are able to not just access to who's getting into the program, but the people who are speaking to them, you're bringing in diversity of thought, perspective, and background.
So again, for PSTA, we make sure, part of it is just communicating and how we market the program. This year, this cohort is the first time that we have 2 directors that are in the program. And when I was recruiting for class of 2020, one came and said, hey, I've always wanted to do this, but I thought it was just for the young people. Or, when you say emerging leaders, I'm thinking, it's for the millennials or the Gen Zs that are just entering the workforce. So I really had to be intentional about the language that I was using and making sure that everyone knew this is leadership at all levels and everyone is welcome to participate. But again, we and the HR and the directors and executive leaders get together in a room and really look at, who's been given opportunities and who hasn't. And I think it has to be intentional. Yeah. Otherwise, there's that saying of what gets measured gets done. And so we look at our numbers and we intentionally make sure that it's diverse. But also by, like I said, limiting access to one per department helps us as well, because it could be very easy to just get all the planning folks who are already, you know, high visibility, very smart, very sharp individuals. And we wanted to make sure that even those people who weren't as seen yet internally still had a voice and an opportunity.
Great, great. And Ray?
I would add that to the point, it is awareness and it's communication, just making sure people are aware, the organization is aware of the upward mobility opportunities. You know, it just goes back to my days in maintenance operations on the floor. As I progressed up through maintenance operations, there wasn't really a clear structure on what that, you had to ask a lot of questions, you had to look for it. It wasn't always made available in an outward sense. And so I think, you know, Tamika made the point very well here. It has to be a purposeful level of awareness to the organization. And it has to be a key objective of the program so that when you're going through the applications process, you make that a primary objective.
Great, great. Well, I think we're about at the end of our time here. I just want to say thank you, Tamika, and thank you, Ray, and thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Jamie. This has been such a wonderful experience. You know, I get to work with these folks throughout the year, but having this conversation is just so valuable. But you see our contact information on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to us. We are more than happy to share information or thoughts on curriculum or how to get anything started, because we're returning the favor because somebody helped us in the past. So thank you again.
Thanks, Lindsay. This is Lisa again. I think it's very inspirational to think about how we really focus on the front line. We've been talking about during the COVID, our frontline responders and how essential transit is, and all the more reason to try to provide opportunities within our agencies. And so I know that some of our agencies are thinking about ways that they can offer some professional development, leadership training, and now we know who to call on to help us get started. So thank you very much. So I want to take a minute here and feature our special link now. This is our trivia quiz to allow you to win today's $100 gift card. And last time we had a winner, Brittany Vall with DRPT. So we hope that we'll be able to offer this to you this time. So here's the link. You have 24 hours to go to the link and answer the trivia questions, and from that we'll determine who the winners are. So anyway, we thank you. The winner will be announced at our next webinar, Nimble Network Planning, on August 21st. So again, I want to thank everybody for participating today, and if you or any of your colleagues would like to view the webinar later, it will be on our website. And I don't see any other questions. So with that, again, thank you to Tamika and Ray and Lindsay. Thank you very much for offering your expertise today and for getting our juices flowing about what maybe our next steps might be. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we hope everybody enjoys a safe and healthy summer, and we'll talk to you later. All right. Thank you for participating. Bye-bye. Okay.